Two families, one forgotten border, and a feud that turned neighbors into enemies for generations. What began as a dispute over land, loyalty, and a single accusation slowly became one of the most infamous family wars in American history. But behind the legends of revenge and violence lies a deeper mystery. Who truly started the bloodshed, and how did a personal conflict become a battle that captured the attention of an entire nation? Because the Hatfields and McCoys were not always enemies. And the moment everything changed is not the story most people think they know. Curiosity loop. The first act of revenge was only the beginning. The real question is what happened when both sides realized the feud had become bigger than any one person. Part 1. The spark that created two enemies. The mountains along the West Virginia-Kentucky border were isolated, harsh, and controlled by family loyalty. In a place where law enforcement was distant and survival depended on trust, a person's name could mean everything. The Hatfields and McCoys lived only a few miles apart, shared the same wilderness, and even fought alongside each other during earlier conflicts. But beneath the surface were old tensions involving land, politics, and competing loyalties. Then one disagreement over property and accusations of betrayal pushed the families toward a breaking point. What seemed like a small conflict became the first crack in a relationship that would never recover. Curiosity loop, but the feud did not become legendary because of an argument. It became legendary because someone decided that justice would no longer come from the courts. Part 2. Revenge, betrayal, and the birth of a blood feud. As accusations spread, both families began seeing themselves as victims defending their honor. Every attack created a new reason for retaliation, and every retaliation created another enemy. The mountains became a battlefield of suspicion. Friends were forced to choose sides, and family loyalty became more powerful than the law itself. But the feud was not just about revenge. Hidden behind the violence were political connections, economic struggles, and powerful figures who helped transform a local dispute into a regional conflict. As tensions continued to rise, the conflict began attracting attention beyond the mountains. What started as a personal dispute between two families slowly became a story that newspapers across the country could not ignore. Curiosity loop. Then came the event that shocked the nation and turned a mountain feud into one of America's most famous scandals. Part 3. The night the feud became a national scandal. The conflict reached a new level when members of one family were accused of crossing enemy territory to carry out an attack. The aftermath created outrage, arrests, and a legal battle that exposed the weakness of local authority. The case revealed how deeply the feud had grown. It was no longer just about two families seeking revenge. It had become a symbol of a larger struggle between old traditions, modern law, and the desire for justice. Newspapers across America followed the story, turning the Hatfields and McCoys into symbols of frontier violence. Reporters searched for heroes and villains, but the truth became harder to separate from the legend. Were they ruthless criminals, desperate families trapped by their environment, or people caught in a cycle they could not escape? Curiosity loop. The feud was already famous, but the final chapter would reveal that even the most powerful families could not escape the consequences of their own war. Part 4. The end of the feud and the legacy left behind. After years of retaliation, both families began paying a heavy price. The violence that was supposed to protect their honor had instead damaged the very communities they fought to defend. Court battles, changing times, and outside pressure slowly brought the D by the world actually happened. But even after the fighting stopped, the legend continued to grow. The story of the Hatfields and McCoys became larger than the families themselves, passed down through generations as a warning about the dangers of revenge and pride. The feud transformed into a symbol of how quickly a small disagreement can become a conflict that no one can fully control. What began with personal accusations and local disputes eventually became a national story about loyalty, justice, and the cost of endless retaliation. Curiosity loop. But decades later, historians would begin questioning the story itself. Because the feud remembered by the world may not be the exact feud that actually happened. Ending. The truth behind America's most famous feud. The Hatfields and McCoys were remembered as enemies forever locked in violence. But the real story is far more complicated than a simple tale of good versus evil. It was shaped by geography, politics, family loyalty, and a world where reputation could determine survival. The feud became a warning about what happens when revenge replaces justice and when old conflicts are allowed to continue for too long. More than a century later, people still ask the same question. Were the Hatfields and McCoys fighting a war they chose, or one they could never escape? Final curiosity loop. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not why the feud began, but why humans continue repeating the same cycle of conflict long after the original reason is forgotten.